Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Texas Public Policy Foundation. My name is George Foreman IV. As you know, this is a 501c3 nonprofit. So we are a nonpartisan, obviously very non-political. Our purpose is to do the research necessary to make the right changes and promote liberty, entrepreneurship, free enterprise, and make sure that that is always the foundation of what we do here in America and across the world. Now, housekeeping. A few notes. One, the doors lock. So if you leave, make sure you have a friend with you to let you in. Also, the bathrooms are outside to the left, easy to find. And we will have a lot of hosts, a lot of panelists. It's going to go all day, so don't feel stressed. You'll have the opportunity to ask questions. This is for you. This is informative, first and foremost. It's a chance for people to get the information necessary to make the right changes and do them the right way. Now, this is the state of Black Texas. And I struggled with that concept because Black is an interesting word. It's a color, it's a description, it's a mindset, it's a lot of things. But more than anything, it's something that people adopt on themselves when necessary and when called upon, freely. I did some research. I found a man named John Garrido. My Spanish is not great, but that's his name. And they met Juan the Handsome. That was his name. He was an African man from Central Africa. He left because during their combination with Portugal, he came to know about the place called the Americas. And he saw an opportunity for self-development, we'll call it at the time. He was a free man, and he funded his own journey to America to colonize. He worked with Spain by choice, and he identified as Black. He, in my opinion, is my first African-American example. He is the first man to freely come from Africa, found a nation and an identity and a wife in the Americas, and write a letter back to Spain and say, here's what I did, here's what I need from you in support. He's a Black man. So, when you see the state of Black Texas, and when you hear the word Black today, think of it as an identity adopted in pride, so that way people knew this American made it here by himself. That's why he called himself that. And that's what we're going to use this word today. A self-identified term called Black, of greatness, of prosperity, of opportunity, of independence, and free enterprise. Black. Now, I'd like to make an introduction. We're going to start, as all great Texans. Before we do this, I'll give you a poem. The first poem I learned in school, one I love. It's called The Pledge of Allegiance. You might know it. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. It's very important that I start with that. Now I'd like to introduce Dr. Eddie Winslow to do our invocation.
Heads are bowed and eyes are closed. Our God and our Father, we invite and we invoke your presence in this room and in your people. We pray for every presenter that you would give them clarity, integrity, sincerity, and even power as we gather here. And we pray that those of us who are here to listen, that we might learn much, and that when we leave this place, that we will be fruitful with the information that has been shared. We thank you now. In Jesus' name, amen.
Now, as you know, we're going to have a lot of panels today. If it's okay, I'd like to introduce Dr. Johnson, introduce our first panel. Many of you may or may not know, but Dr. Johnson is a part of our Booker T. Washington Institute here at the Texas Public Policy Foundation. An inspiration to me and many people here. So, Dr. Johnson, thank you.
Thank you, George. Good morning. How's everybody doing? Good, good. Y'all, I had my cup of coffee, I guess you can tell. I get really excited when I have a cup of coffee, man. You know, and I get really excited about freedom. If you go back and you look in the Bible, freedom is mentioned over 100 times or referred to either free, freedom, freely, free man, free woman. And folks say, well, Dr. Johnson, what is your vocation? Well, I'm the director of the Booker T. Washington Initiative here at Texas Public Policy Foundation, but I'm also a freedom fighter. That's how I got my job, man. I'm a freedom fighter. And I look out in the audience and I see a couple of folks who've been with me on a couple of fights. I'm glad to see Marie Preston here and Dr. Winslow. We were fighting down in Louisiana and ended up, we walked into 21 prisons in Louisiana, us and Jesus Christ, and when we walked out, Jesus stayed. We put a church in all of them. Because we recognized that we were faced with a problem that we could not solve alone. Man could not solve that problem by himself. And so when we are faced with a problem in the black community, we are well acquainted with our direction and position and who to go to. My grandmother say, look to the hills which cometh your help. Look to the Lord. Because now we're faced with a problem that we cannot solve. Obviously, we cannot solve it because we make up 12% of Texas population, black people, and we make up, if we round it up to the nearest whole number, 34% of the prison population, and it's been that way averaging over the last 10 years. So we've demonstrated that we cannot solve this problem through education, through psychology, through programs. We are going to have to look to the hills for which comes our help. We've tried everything except for one thing. And what we're gathered here today to talk about is that thing that we have not tried. Give God a chance. See, I've seen what happened in the prisons. We have 7 churches in Angola, which was the bloodiest prison in America. Largest maximum security prison in the United States of America. The first people I went to, Marie, was the politicians. Then I went to the pastors. I went to the National Baptist Convention. I thought it was going to be maybe 4,000 folk. It was 44,000 folk up there. After the first day, I jumped on the plane and left, and because I realized that wasn't the group to lead that mission. And while I was on the plane, God said, you flying all over the world trying to find somebody to do what I told you to do. So I went back to the small handful of folk that was there with me, and I said, that group is big, but it's not going to help us. We're going to have to lean into God and believe in God, and God will take a small group and transform a nation. Right now, over 5 million people have gone through those churches inside the prisons in Louisiana. You know how I know? Because they sign in and they sign out. In prison, you can't go nowhere without signing in and signing out. So I say, tell me how many folk are using these. Utilization. We have invited, and I thank God for Rudy. Rudy's heading up the Texas Legislative Black Caucus. Thank God for him being in the room. But raise your hand if you're a member, if you're a member or elected official in the Texas Legislative Black Caucus today. Raise your hand. There aren't any. Sometimes you have to realize the people in the room are the ones who God placed in the room. And it's not the obvious folk. David was not the obvious person. But he's the one who slew Goliath. It's not the obvious folk. It's you. You're here because you belong here. You're here because you're a freedom fighter. And if those folks who were in charge right now were leading the battle for freedom, then why are we the smallest group in Texas with the largest group in the prisons? Behind bars, which when you behind bars, you are not free. With that being said, we got a lot of good folk. We got a lively panel. We got a very distinguished panel to start this. This is the first annual. I want to see this happen every year. State of Black Texas. This is our first one. And I'm going to take a few moments. These guys got some real deep backgrounds. So I'm going to take a few moments and introduce them, because I don't want to just floss over these guys, because I'm impressed with them, really. Dr. Dana Carson is the founder and senior pastor of Reflections Christian Kingdom World Outreach International, The Rock, a true scholar and theologian. Dr. Carson's ministry focused heavily on rooted in both spiritual and educational empowerment of children and youth. Dr. Carson has 3 doctoral degrees, one from Boston University in theology studies, Regional University in organizational leadership, and Logos University in Christian psychology. He has also 3 master's degrees in guidance counseling from Texas A&M, Master in Divinity from Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary, Oral Roberts University, and a Global Executive MBA. Please welcome to the stage and to the platform, Dr. and Apostle, and my frat brother, Dana Carson. Bishop Flowers. Pastor Charles Flowers has been senior pastor of Faith Outreach Center International, FOCI, since March 11, 2001. Pastor Flowers is convinced that believers are to recognize their unique gifts, spiritual gifts, and assignments, realize their potential through discipline, training, and personal intimacy with God, organized to ignite the synergetic power among the saints, and mobilized to advance the kingdom of God. He is originally from Troy, North Carolina, married to the love of his life, Janice, who is from St. Louis, and they have 4 wonderful children. Welcome to the stage, Dr. Flowers. And last but not least, my colleague, friend, and co-laborer in the vineyards, Mandy Drogan. Mandy and I really don't need this from Mandy, but Mandy and I have been friends for quite some time. When she was with American Federation of Children, I saw this fiery, young lady out there fighting on the battlefield. I said, who is that guy? That's a soldier out there fighting. They said, no, that's Mandy. Mandy says, look, we need to make changes. We need to organize. I thought I was back in the Army, Coach. Mandy's out there organizing. She says, look, now we need these people to win and these people to lose in order for us to advance our cause and advance our mission. Mandy Drogan is the campaign manager for Next Generation Texas, here with us now. And we're so glad to have her with our TPPF family. Mandy is a top education reform leader in Texas. When you talk about education reform, Mandy's out there on the cutting edge. When we talk about cutting edge, you got to bleed a little bit out there, and she doesn't mind doing it. Prior to coming with us, she was at American Federation of Children for 8 years, and she oversaw significant wins. When we talk about a fighter and talk about winning, you got to have Mandy on your team. Mandy lives in Austin with her husband, John Drogan. They have 3 wonderful children. Welcome to the stage, Mandy Drogan. I'm going to give each one of them, we're going to start with Mandy to just give about a 3-minute spiel on What got you involved in this fight, Mandy, and where do you see us going?
Thank you. Well, what got me involved in this fight is, like you, I'm a freedom fighter. And with that, I'll say I'm an opportunity provider. My passion is children and empowering parents. And I say that because I'm a mother of 3. And if you're a parent or a grandparent in this room, or even you just have children in your life that you love, what I know is true deep down in my soul is that there is no one, no bureaucrat, no institution, no one on the face of the earth that loves my children like I do. And I believe that about all of you. And when I look around and see the devastation that is going on in our country, so much of it comes from parents not having the power to raise their children the way they want. They get a district assigned to them, and it doesn't matter if it serves your child. It doesn't matter if your child is gifted or needs some help, or your child shouldn't be in that space because it doesn't align with your cultural values. Whatever it is, parents here in Texas, particularly our low-income and minority parents, they don't have a choice. And so I want to join with all of you and everyone on this stage to make sure that parents, particularly those that cannot move, that do not have the resources to send their kids to the school that they want, that is given back to you. Because again, no one will love your child like you do, and you should be empowered with the transparency to know what they're teaching. You should be empowered to know that the curriculum, the lesson plans, the programming, the values that are being taught are the top quality that you deserve. You must always be met with respect by the teachers and the administration and the school districts. And ultimately, the only way to get those 3 points is to have a choice. And so I am passionate about empowering parents with the choice to select a school that best meets what you want to see your child to grow up to be.
Thank you so much, Mandy. Bishop Flowers.
Two things come to my mind. First of all, in Deuteronomy chapter 6, book of Deuteronomy chapter 6, God instructs his people to train your children when they lie down, when they stand up, and as they're going by the way. So we have a responsibility to steward a worldview to the next generation. Schools should not be in conflict with that. In fact, schools should assist that, so that the home and the educational environment are not in opposition. It was Abraham Lincoln who said that the philosophy in the classroom in one generation will be the philosophy of government in the next. So he understood, I think what we have lost in many cases an understanding of, is that ideologies that are in force right now are perpetuated by those who are in an educational institution. And if we want different outcomes, we have to start shaping things differently in the classroom. Last thing I'll say in regard to that is as one called of God to advance his kingdom, that is there's a far expanse from making speeches and singing songs on a Sunday morning. It has to reach the culture. The culture has to come under this influence of the principles of the kingdom of God. And when it does, everybody wins.
Apostle. Thank you so much, Bishop. Apostle Carson.
Okay. Your question was what got me into this concern. Like others, I'm a freedom fighter as well. What got me into this level of participation in helping to direct and redirect the pathways of our younger generation that are suffering from a lack of opportunity and also planned failure, is my personal testimony. I'm from Chicago, Illinois. I was from the Inglewood district, one of the worst areas in our country, and I was a high school dropout, and I never had one teacher to encourage me to pursue my academics. I was a little undisciplined, but I was rough around the edges in terms of just being a class clown kind of guy, not a thug. But I kept getting suspended over and over and over again from school. And that was just the way they dealt with me. Okay, you're going home, you're out for 3-4 more days. You're going to come back because I was talking in class. I didn't know I was talking. I just had to talk. I was undisciplined. And so I was even told by one teacher that I wasn't going to be anything in life. And well, my senior year, I was lacking 3 credits, and I wasn't going to graduate with my class. So after the basketball season was over, because I was on the basketball team, I just stopped going to classes and failed more classes, and then ended up finishing school in Dawson Skills Center, right across from the projects in Chicago on 31st Street. And I graduated from Dawson Skills Center with about a class of 16 or 17, and everybody in that class was old enough to be my mother and father. I was the only young person in there. And but of course, my story now is I have 3 doctorates. I actually have four masters and an undergraduate degree. And I'm even in the pursuit now of another doctoral degree because of my desire to continue to learn. And I know that knowledge is not the key to power, it's applied knowledge. And so I've learned personally that a person can do what others don't think they can do if they've been given the right kind of support systems that can help them have a little bit more courage and confidence in themselves. And I wasn't an academician, but I'm considered an academician now, and I fool people. But so that's what really has me in the fight, because personally I know that I wasn't slated to do well, and it's only the grace of God that kept me from going to jail, prison, etc. And so I know if God did it for me, he can do it for others. And so that's what got me into it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Carson. Let's give our panelists a round of applause. Carter G. Woodson, in 1935, his revised version of his book, The Miseducation of the Negro. Dr. Woodson recognized the importance of real education back before 1935. And Dr. Carson, you mentioned planned failure. Planned failure. Now, sometimes planned failure can happen within a system, and folks who are carrying it out don't even really know they're carrying it out. Sometimes they can be miseducating folk, and you don't even really know you miseducating folk. But at the end of the day, the outcome is still the same. Now, I have some data. We're a research institute right here, so we do a lot of researching. So I have some data and if you could put that up in terms of the population of Texas. The white population of Texas, if you round it up to the whole number, is going to be 62%. And Hispanic population, if you round it up to the whole number, is going to be 19%. And the black population of Texas, if you round it to the whole number, is going to be 12%. But the prison population is a little bit different, you know, because the prison population is, if you look at it, if you round it, it's going to be, for the white population, it's going to be 33%, because it's 32.6. And then Hispanic population is 33.2, which is, you round it to 33. And the black population is 33.7. And that's on a 10-year average. That means you look at the whole trend for 10 years. Now, if we're the smallest group and we make up the largest amount of folks in prison, it's kind of like, I don't know if you ever heard the chicken and the pig discuss breakfast, you know. And the pig say, man, I hate breakfast. I can't stand breakfast. And the chicken say, well, breakfast isn't so bad, man. I supply maybe 1 or 2 eggs, and then I go lay some more eggs. It's a small sacrifice. The pig say, yeah, but I'm giving up a pound of flesh every time somebody eats breakfast. See, so I make that point, and we're going to start with Dr. Carson. I make that point, Dr. Carson, because who's the major stakeholder here in this fight? And 70% of the folks who are incarcerated are reading at and below a 4th grade level. So there's a direct correlation between education and the lack of education and miseducation and criminal justice. So the good news is we can fix it. The tough news, and the reason why you don't see a whole bunch of folk who you think would be here, the tough reason is because we're the #1 stakeholder. We want that 62% to help out. I think it's great. The 19%, they need to help out. But when you make up 12% of the state population and 34% consistently over the last 10 years of the prison population, if you're anything like me, you either have somebody in your family who's been to prison, or you're some of your friends, cousins, nephews. You touch somebody who's been to prison if you're in that 12%. So Dr. Carson, with that being said, the Supreme Court in Carson versus Macon, I don't know if you made, is that your lawsuit? Carson versus Macon basically has said, look, we're going to unchain the churches because we're going to make it unconstitutional. We found it unconstitutional, discriminatory to keep religious-based schools out of the market of working with public funds. So if a parent chooses for their kid to go to a religious-based school, then the dollar should follow the kid. What would that mean for, and I know you've had a school before, what would that mean for your church and your school?
Well, I think that it is definitely, it would definitely add to the success of students. Dr. Johnson, my dissertation to Boston University was about how independent churches in select areas could reach African American males between the ages of 14 and 35. And that was written in 95. In those stats, 25% of males at that point in time, one was they were either in prison, parole, or probation. Now, when we look at the criminal justice system and we look at the overwhelming statistics of black and particularly black men going to the prison system, we have to consider that there is a moral aspect to this too, in terms of parameters and decision making. And so if we had an opportunity to educate these black men, and we look at the statistics and the data that shows that there's a correlation between the lower income schools and the low performing school and prison population, we could actually be a very viable solution if we could get the funding that was necessary to be able to provide the kind of holistic education that is sensitive to the African American and Latino situation. But we would have to have the funding. I've had a school before, and we actually went 0 to 12, but it was very, very difficult to try to keep that school competitive and funded because we had to raise every single penny. And the parents that wanted their kids in the school couldn't afford it, and sometimes, they'd get a little salty because they felt like your school was a potential key to my child's success, and this is a church school, and why don't you just let them in? And we couldn't accommodate them because of sustainability issues. So the Carson case would really help Carson.
Well, I figured you had signed on board. you had signed on board. Bishop, we're going to come your way, and then we'll make it down to Mandy, because I know you've had similar experiences.
Yes, we had a school in our church for the first 15 years of our church's existence, because we understood what I expressed earlier, that if whatever's planted into the mind and heart of a child builds a framework for who they're going to be as an adult and what contribution they're either going to make or not make to the society that is around them. And since we have this commission, the men and women of God have a commission to take the message of the kingdom into, Jesus said in Matthew 28, he said, go ye into all the world, all the cosmos, all of that order, all of the world systems. Go into that. And you go in it with something. You go in it with something that has proven itself to be superlative to all of those other principles, which is the principles of God, based on the love of God and the faith in the redemptive work of Jesus Christ. But you teach that, and then you teach the student to be the very best at what they are, whatever they have a passion to pursue, to be the very best at it, and let a good moral foundation accompany them in that pursuit. So for money to be able to follow the child, just as Dr. Carson said, what the challenge we ran into is they're paying their tax dollars, these families are, and then they're paying additional monies to privately educate their children. Now you got to think about, they must have seen a tremendous value in putting their children in another environment if they were willing to do that. Pay their taxes and then double down and send their children to someplace else. That alone says that there's something in the system, in the current educational system, that's not working for parents. So if they cannot economically afford to do that, why would we tie their hands and say, no, you got to keep sending that child into an environment that you don't agree with?
That's right. That's right.
So the guy sitting across, the young person sitting across the table from you, because of how they've been trained through the educational process, they grow distant from you. You don't even know who that person is anymore, because it's not the morals you're teaching at home. They're getting another set of morals. They're getting another philosophy. They're getting another worldview in their educational environment, and it conflicts in the home. I think that's the tragedy of it all, is that the system the state system now has become hostile to what happens at the kitchen table than it should be.
Thank you so much. Mandy, and the governor has a parent bill of rights. And of course, we at TPPF basically support the parent bill of rights. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on now, what we can do, and what the pastors in the church can do to get in this fight. And I know you mentioned some information you had on the folks out in Florida.
I did, and I want to talk about Florida and how incredible their tax credit scholarship is going. They're about 20 years in, and right now this year they have 80,000 low-income and minority students that get to take the money that was allocated for their education. But before I do that, if you'll indulge me to answer a couple questions that I get asked a lot of times when I'm out on the road. This seems like common sense. Of course parents should be able to make this choice, right? Yes, I should have this, so why is it not happening? And Dr. Johnson spoke briefly about my previous role with the American Federation for Children, and in that role, I did a lot of advocacy work where that I could get parents to go and advocate for their child, and I did a lot of political work. And the reason when I was in that role, the political work is so important, and the reason that parents feel so frustrated is money talks, right? Money talks, we all know this. It's not what you know, it's who you know or how much money you have, right? And so that's why we're seeing parents show up at these school board meetings just mad as a striped snake, getting drug out, because they know something's wrong and no one's listening to them. But that wasn't their first attempt at trying to change something. That wasn't their first attempt at trying to get help. And so when we're talking specifically about the Black community or any other minority community that are disadvantaged both with their education and economically, they don't have that power. And so you think, well, particularly you pointed out, where are members of the Black Caucus? Why are they not here? Well, money talks. And you know who has a lot of money? Unions. $3 billion a year is how much money they have. And you notice I left out the word teachers, because this isn't about pitting teachers and parents. We've found in polling that parents want the teachers to be their partners. Parents should be the ultimate authority. So then it begs the question, why is this not changing? I can't tell you how many meetings I've sat in with very powerful people, very wealthy people, and or leaders within our state that say, I agree with you. We have all the empirical evidence to show that allowing the funding to follow the child to private schools so these gentlemen can open and operate thriving schools, we know it works. But the problem is the money that follows, and this is the problem. The only thing that changes that is when folks like all of us, parents, just engaged members of society that say, hey, we have a problem here, recognize that one, the ultimate authority is the parent, but two, that funding is meant to educate a child. What people also don't realize is, I'd love to get a little bit of audience interaction. Does anyone have any idea how much we spend per student in Texas? Throw out a number, take a guess. We always hear we're underfunded, we don't have enough money, we're not spending enough. Tell me how much you think. Somebody, shout out.
7.
You're close. Y'all are all under. We spend over $16,000 per child. Guess how much the average private school, and you gentlemen might be able to say what you would have needed to operate an amazing school to cater to your communities. $9,600. Private schools, particularly religious private schools, not only do they see incredible results, better results than we're getting in the public schools, but they cost less to operate. People don't realize that because the opposition constantly says, oh, we can't afford the St. Michael's, which is $30,000 a year. Well, we get that. But the reality is you don't need $30,000 a year, do you? Do you need 30? No. That's right. And so the problem is it actually comes down to money. And I say that because we have so much data now. Texas is lagging in this. 31 other states have school choice, education freedom, parental empowerment. We can call it a whole lot of things, and we don't have it. But what could it do for your community? And this is where the primary basis of the discussion and the argument is. What it does for your community is it allows the parents to select the school that their child goes to that teaches them the quality curriculum they want and the values that they want. I hear all the time, but we don't have private schools here. Well, the reality is there is a whole line of incredible faith-based leaders and education leaders who are saying, I would do this if the money would follow my child. I want this. We also hear the opposition constantly say, this will defund the public school system. Not true. Nobody wants to defund any education that is providing a quality education. But in case we haven't really looked at it, our poor kids, our minority kids, our African American kids, they are struggling. And they are struggling because they are being sent to schools, and we keep hearing the administration say, but we can fix it, we can fix it, we can fix it with more money. But y'all know that's not the deal. You don't need more money.
But here's the thing.
It's the values.
Here's where you make an excellent point right there. You know, one of the things that we really don't care about is whether or not failing public schools get funded more money. That's not our deal. You know, because if you're a failing school, you shouldn't get more money to keep failing. Because you're a school to prison pipeline. You're part of school to prison pipeline. That doesn't work for us. And see, that's where our messaging is. And that's where the critical moment is for us. Because right now, every day that a failing school continues to operate at the level that it's operating, it sends our young boys and girls to prison.
That's right.
See, this is a pound of flesh conversation. Yeah. See, we're not here to play with this thing. This is a pound of flesh conversation. This is a fight on the battlefield conversation. And I know I see you're ready to go, Doc. Let me just throw one thing out here. I'm gonna throw some numbers out here real quick. And if you would put this up on the screen, the Catholic schools over the last 20 years have outperformed in math, reading, science, and technology public schools consistently over the past 20 years, every year. And that's NAEP data, the National Assessment for Educational Programs. That's our national education report card. And so they have a model where religious-based schools incorporating with both Bishop Flowers and Dr. Carson have mentioned that moral component. And there is a population out there of kids in our community who need that. We need to be around the church. Some of us need to be around the church, and the church works well for us. They're going to teach us math, reading, and science, but we also going to brush up against the cross. Let me tell you, now that's our conversation. See, that's black folk conversation. And when you don't bring us around the cross, and we stray too far away from the cross, you see what you see, the outcomes. And I just want to say this, and I'm bringing Dr. Carson into the conversation. We did a survey, and the polling data demonstrated 88% of black voters, people who are registered voters in black in Texas, 88% support parent choice. 88%. And 81% of black voters in Texas support the dollar following the child. Now, is there any reason All of these African American voters across the state of Texas want, number one, to have the right to choose the best educational option for their own kid, and number two, their tax dollars to follow their choice in education. Is there any reason why a black legislator in the state of Texas would vote no and vote against that? Now, let me go on, Dr. Carson.
Okay, so, one, I wanted to say, when the crime rate was rising in Houston during the social distancing period, and then they were asking churches to open back up, the mayor asked that he put a letter out and wrote to all the clergy in Houston and asking them to please open their doors and to start having church again, because he felt like there was a connection between the rising crime rate and the closing down of in-person worship. And so he put an alert out, which lets us know that beyond even school, we see that there's a correlation between the church and crime. But I was going to say on the other note is, Dr. Johnson, is that we understand that this is not really about the welfare, the empowerment of our children. This is about money. This is about something else. And our children are being used to enhance the revenues of corporate business and privatization of prisons. Our children are they are the pipeline of employees of a sophisticated slavery system. And if we don't stop this, because they've piped into the education system, and so they're grooming our kids from school to prison, and there are big dollars in that. And if we bring those numbers down, then those numbers impact someone else. And so we got to wake up. We got to wake up.
Doc, I see you. Go ahead, jump in.
This should infuriate you.
Yeah.
It should infuriate you that a system is designed not to put the education and the development of your children first, but to put something else first. Money, interest. If there's anything that moves people to action, many times it's the welfare of their children, because their own legacy kind of lives on through their children. If the politicians, not a political statement I'm making, I'm making an observation. If they know that, then why are they not doing something about it? If they know that if a child is not reading at the third grade level by the time he or she is in the third grade, that privatized prisons, are planning to be built to accommodate that population moving forward. Right. If they know that, why are they not pulling out all the stops to stop such a pipeline from being perpetuated for the next generation? Is it because, these are questions, is it because the lure of money and the possibility of them maintaining their own political careers, is it possible that that's more important to them than the welfare of our children? If that is the case, we have a responsibility in this room to let such politicians know that that is an unacceptable option. Our children must come first. And you, in your duty and oversight, must help make that that possible for them to thrive in this culture?
One of the things we see, one of the things we see out here is the fact that folks will say, this is gonna harm public schools, school choice, parent choice. Well, if you're afraid of that, then change your programming. Because obviously, you know, when you tell me that open it up and allowing parents to choose the best educational options for their children, they not gonna choose you. Right. Then what does that say to me about you? Yeah. Right. You're not getting it right. But here's the thing, you know, and I want to talk about this because if we have a model that's working and we have the data, it's innate data. I mean, this is not Richard Johnson's data. We have the data that demonstrates that religious-based schools in our communities work better. Then, you know, how many of you guys ever used to watch wrestling? Tag team wrestling? And you got a guy out there just getting thrown all over the ring, right? And his partners, he reaching all out there, he jumping up, he can't go across that rope, but he trying to stick his leg, anything he can so that his partner can tap him into the fight, right? That's what the church is doing. The church doing like this, trying to tap into the fight, and they dragging the guy way back on the other side of the ring so that he can't get into the fight. My thing is, you know, like I said in my opening statement, we've tried everything. See, when I realized we had tried everything in the prisons, you know, being in psychology and creating programs and educational programs, and it still wasn't working, I said, let's try God and see how that works for us. And because we tried God in Louisiana prisons, Angola now has a golf course in it. That was the bloodiest prison in America. It's got a golf course in Angola. You can tee off. You see what I'm saying? I'm just giving you the miracle working ability of God. That's all I'm doing. If you don't think God worked, I want you to call up Booker T. Washington and ask him if God worked. 5,000 schools plus Tuskegee University in the black community. Ask him if God works. If you don't think God works, I want you to call Frederick Douglass and ask him if God was working when he sat down with Lincoln and said, let's try to put black folk in a regiment called the Fighting 54 for Massachusetts, and we'll win this battle against the South, and we'll destroy slavery. You don't think God works? We can do that in our schools today. We have this opportunity because never before have we had it where a governor brought forward a parent bill of rights and saying the parents should have 100% control over their children's education. Have we ever had that in Texas? Should we be behind that in Texas? I'm gonna ask you guys to do one thing. I want you to pay attention. I want all eyes. I'm like Tupac. I want all eyes on me right now. All right, put all eyes on me, because I want you to repeat after me. I'm gonna say it, then I want you to repeat after me. If you believe this, fund the children, not the institution. Fund the children, not the institution. Fund the children, not the institution. Because our Texas Constitution don't say you're supposed to fund institutions. It said that the legislators are required, said they shall provide a free and efficient education to every child in Texas, black, white, brown, no matter what your race, creed, color, or religion is. And if you're not doing that, then we're in a violation of Article 7 of our Constitution, and we need to be in compliance. With that being said, I got to the, I look at Mandy, she's ready to go. With that being said, we're going to open it up to the best part of our discussion, and that is our question and answers and comments from you guys. So with that being said, right now it's open up to you. If you have any questions of any of our panelists, to raise your hand, and we'll have somebody come by and bring the microphone and let you do your thing. We wasn't that good.
Understanding that there is a constitutional violation, what organizations have taken up a lawsuit against the state of Texas and TEA to push the issue of funding children and not institutions? Because we can identify massive amounts of waste across every ISD in the state. So who is taking up that mantle?
I'd like to see the Urban League take it up.
Consider it done.
I'd like to see the Urban League take it up, man, because I'm glad to be in partnership with you guys. Because, look, the Austin Area Urban League is taking a powerful stand for African Americans, for black folks across the state of Texas. Let me tell you, man, back in the day, you know, and you guys know this for a fact, back in the day, the NAACP and the Urban League used to be the proud voice of moving us forward. And I'm glad to see the Austin Area Urban League stepping up today and doing that and taking on that mantle, because you guys are more vocal than the other groups that I've seen or heard out there. I saw a hand over here.
Thank you. Yes, I understand that Governor Abbott here in Texas has endorsed school choice. Do we know who is currently elected who actually supports school choice as well? And if we don't know who, is there a way to find out who?
I'm going to let Mandy chime in, and then I'm going to follow up.
We do know. In fact, I'm tracking it very closely. I base it off of several votes that have been taken in the past, as well as the meetings that I mentioned, where that myself and a coalition are constantly going in and talking to these legislators. And that's where I was saying that oftentimes we have legislators that'll say, we know, but. And that's where the community is so important, is because let me tell you, those entities that benefit from the system, the institutions, the funneling of money, they're talking to them constantly. And so we've seen this massive rise of engagement from parents and community leaders and communities as a whole saying, you're going to listen to us now. And we have a monumental opportunity in the 2023 session to communicate directly. People don't realize that making a phone call, sending an email, they log that. It's there, and it does matter. Something that Dr. Johnson mentioned earlier about not just the governor, but how people make choices and why they're not, 22 years ago, 22 years ago in Florida, the proposal for school choice and parental empowerment, thank you, had been a battleground for over a decade. And they were so close. They'd been tracking the votes just like we're doing here. They knew what we call the whip count, the vote count. And they were one vote short. And so my former chairman at the American Federation for Children, who this was his passion, along with myself, and he I've watched him and followed him. He went and knocked on that one black Democrat's door and said, this is coming up. You voted against it for years. You know it's the right thing. We've talked about this. You have no re-election coming up. You have no reason to not do this. It's that one lone black Democrat who was not running for re-election, so he did not care what was going to fund his campaign. It was that single vote that crossed over and said, you're right. I'm voting for this. Now what happened? The first year, about 1,600 students were able to qualify for the scholarship tax credit program. Within 20 years, it's over 80,000 students, 80,000 low-income Black and Hispanic and minority students that right now, right this very moment, have their tail ends in a school like these gentlemen want to open. And it's because the funding followed the student. And they're doing it. And their gains, the studies have been found. The Urban Institute could, can you go pull up the Step Up for Students? That would be awesome. The Urban Institute did a study, because now we're 20 years into this, right? And it has steadily grown. And they did a study and found that minorities that get the scholarship have a 43% more likely chance to go on to school beyond high school to college. It's massive. It has changed family trees. It has changed the dynamics of families and communities, because these kids are able to go to school that are not motivated by the greed, because let's be honest, that's what it is. The funding, they want to keep control over it so that they can fund all their pet projects. Y'all, in Grapevine, Colleyville ISD, they did an audit and got rid of 18,500 vendors that were pushing what was deemed nefarious programming on children. That was one school district here in Texas. It's going on all across Texas. But when we take the opportunity to fund the students, not the system, this is really important to your point. When we fund the students, what they have found, not only are kids more likely to go to school, minority students, but the public schools get better, because guess what? When there's some competition and a parent can say, I appreciate what you're doing over there at my zoned ISD, but over here, this is the results. Over here, my child is disciplined. Over here, my child has an opportunity to know the Lord. Whatever it is. And that is what we're seeing. And one last point. After that happened, back in 2018, after the program has been in place for a long time, that was the gubernatorial race between Ron Desantes and Charlie Crist. I don't know if y'all, I'm from the political world, so I followed it very closely. Everybody thought Charlie Crist, the Democrat, was going to win, but guess what he came out and said? I support the system, not the parents. All you, at that point, 70,000 parents, low-income and minority parents, mostly Democratic voters, all of you, I'm going to take away your child's scholarship. Because he had the unions or the entities that benefited from the system. I'm going to take him away. And he straight up said it. And guess what happened? Those moms, those families said, oh, no, you're not. To your point that this issue, people will vote based on what is best for their children. The Wall Street Journal did an article immediately following, because all the polling was wrong, and said the Black, single, low-income moms flipped this race and gave it to Ron DeSantis because they saw their students, their children had been in school, in the school that they chose, that served their needs. And y'all, we have these schools here. And this is how we change Texas.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let me tell you, and also, how many of you all know how many Black state representatives we have? Rudy, how many Black, do we have 17? We have 17 Black state representatives. And how many Black senators do we have? 2? We have 2, so that's 19. That ought to be 19 votes for freedom, am I right? Should it be 19 votes for freedom? Marie, is that gonna be 19 votes for freedom? Huh? Doc, is that gonna be 19 votes for freedom? Let me tell you the reason why. Let me tell you the reason why it's going to be 19 votes for freedom. It's going to be 19 votes for freedom because of the people in this room. See, David was sent down to the battlefield just to bring some lunch. He wasn't even sent down there to fight. Because nobody thought nobody even could conceive of David going down into the valley of Eli and fighting Goliath. That wasn't even a thought in their mind. Because if his brothers and all the folks, that the whole host of Israel was standing up there on the mountain. None of them would go down there in the valley. The normal person would think, see, you got to get spiritual about this. The normal person would think that the whole host of Israel would charge down into the valley of Eli. No one would think that a little old scrawny kid out there that brought some lunch, his daddy sent him down to take his brother some lunch, would hear Goliath taunting the army, right? Nobody thought that. And so David said, well, look, I'll fight him. Saul said, here, let me give you my sword. Let me give you my stuff. David tried it on and said, no, I got to fight him the way I know how to fight. See, sometimes you can't take the sword and shield of the other folk. Sometimes you got to fight how you know how to fight. And we know how to fight. If you can build a church inside a prison, we know how, and we built 21 of them. We know how to fight. And we come for the fight. We didn't come to make peace with the devil. We came here looking for a fight. So we ain't surprised when those folk with the sword and shield don't show up. We didn't expect them to be here. But it would have been surprised if they'd have been here. And so what I'm saying to you right now, and everybody on this stage and you in that audience, y'all know we got a fight on our hand. But we're fighting for the future of Texas. We're fighting for the future of our families. We're fighting for the future of our civilization, America. And I'm going to step out. 10-year average, 34% black folk in prison in Texas right now. Those are weak links in the chain. Coach, when I was in the Army, Coach, what you tell me, man, if the unit is only strong as the weakest link. We got to tighten up our unit. 36 months, 3 years, Doc, let's make a goal and a pledge today that in 3 years, that 34% going to be chopped down to 20%. Let's take 14% off of that by cutting off the school to prison pipeline and doing what it takes in this fight. And if those 17 folks in the House ain't with us, then they're enemies of freedom. And those 2 in the Senate ain't with us, then they're enemies of freedom. We're not fighting for Democrats or Republicans, black or white. Freedom ain't got no color, and freedom ain't got no religious base. Now it's spiritual with God. There's many different religions. Freedom is spiritual with God. We're fighting for freedom. And if people got a problem with us fighting for freedom, then they're against freedom. And if you're against freedom and you representing me in my neighborhood, in my zip code, then you got on the wrong uniform. One last thing I want to make. I was in the Army. I got my old Army coach here with me. Here's my backup. It don't matter what the other folks' uniform is on the other side. We didn't know them. We put on OD green, right? We put on our battle dress uniform. We put on OD green, our camouflage green. And if you didn't have on that uniform, you was just the enemy. It didn't matter. If we didn't have on these uniforms and we had on these suits like we are, we may sit down and have a cup of coffee together. But today, your uniform is different than mine. My uniform is freedom. And I came to fight for it. Doc, I see you chomping.
Yeah, I was going to say, Dr. Johnson, one of the things that we have to do, we know that we are smaller in number, but I believe that we're more powerful in resource because we've got to educate. That's one of the problems. our people don't really know what's happening. Parents don't really know what's happening. You know, you and I sat and talked about statistics one day, and we looked at zip codes, and we looked at the population of prisoners and where they came from. I think that parents, we've got to have some type of structure that strategically we begin to educate parents. I mean, even I want to do something in my congregation. I like to put together some unified presentation so that we're all fighting and educating on the same front, because it's very difficult to look at those stats and see that prison population and what zip codes they're from, the free lunch programs, just looking at how they're being fed into those prisons, and not say, hey, why isn't anything happening? It's very difficult. So I think that we have to awake by educating parents. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Well, I didn't say you stole my thunder, but that's okay. You always do. Doc, you taking a step. I know you're doing something on the 21st in San Antonio, and he's in one of those top 30 zip codes that are feeders to the criminal justice system. We're gonna hear from Doc, and then we're gonna go to a question.
Yes, when I discovered in talking with Dr. Johnson that the zip code that I live in and the zip code my church is in is actually one of those zip codes that have produced one of the larger numbers of prisoners, people going from our community into prison. And as I said to him, you wouldn't know that driving down our street because it doesn't look like it. But the data shows that people leaving that community, a healthy percentage of that population, or a healthy number of that population, I should say, is going into the prison system. And if I can do something to stop that, so what we have done is identified all of the churches that are in those 4 zip codes in San Antonio. Our office, our executive director is here, she asked a question earlier, sending a letter of invitation to every one of those pastors for the 21st so that you can come tell those pastors in San Antonio what you're telling these pastors in this room today. Because Dr. Carson is right. The tool to educate the population is the pastor. And if he or she will stand up and declare these things and train their people this way, we can mobilize an army that can change the face of this thing very quickly. But we have to be willing to be the people who will stand and make it a presentation so that they're hearing kind of a homogenized message across the horizon would certainly help as well.
That's why I like you guys. I mean, you guys, your boss is God. You ain't got to answer nobody but God.
Right.
You know, politicians have to answer to the people. You know, other folk got to answer to their supervisor. Your supervisor is God. You say, look, God told me to do it, I'm doing it.
Yeah.
If he say don't do it, I ain't gonna do it.
Right.
I got a question.
Oh yeah, I was going to ask for a point of clarity because I often hear the argument about disadvantaged students. There's an equity and an equality value proposition in there for all black students or all non-white students, because in those affluent districts or any district that has a high per student funding formula, there exists inequality. My son is a senior in Pflugerville ISD, and he still faces racism and bigotry and exclusion from certain issues or certain aspects of a quality education, though we live in a district that has resources to apply across the board. The inequity and the inequality still exist. When we talk about the school choice, how do we go from an endorsement to action? Because I believe that a lot of our politicians talk too much. And they'll tell us what we want to hear or what we need to hear to get the vote, then they don't do nothing. So how do we, when we think across equity and equality across the district from a funding perspective, how do we go from that looking at just the disadvantaged students to understanding that this is a problem across the board, and we begin to tackle that?
Yeah, let me respond to that. You know, Quincy, thank you for bringing that. Let me tell you, I grew up in one of them zip codes. I was born in 5th Ward, and I grew up in, folks moved to Pleasantville right down the street. I grew up in one of those zip codes, man. I never thought I was disadvantaged. My daddy told me, he said, neither my dad or my mom finished the 8th grade. Well, my dad said, man, you just as good or better than anybody. He made me believe that. And then I read somewhere it said, we hold these truths to be self-evident.
All men.
That all men are created equal and endowed not by the government,
By their creator.
endowed by their creator. See, the government didn't give me my rights.
That's right.
God gave me my rights. This is a God moment. See, I know we want to logically rationalize this moment. This is a God moment. Because we recognize that everything we've tried have not worked. See, the 13th Amendment says neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist except for a crime where an individual has been duly convicted in America and is all governed by America. So all you have to do is plea bargain and get you a conviction. Next thing you know, you're a slave.
That's right.
This is a God moment. And we're gonna have to relinquish this, give it to God, and your action question, follow God in getting the outcome. Now, this is what Richard is doing. I'm trusting God with the outcome. I'm gonna obey him and do the work. Here's the work we have to do. Everybody got a index card. Let me see if you got an index card. Hold your index card. I need to see it. If you got an index card, hold your index card up. Now, if you believe that we should fund the child and not the institution, if you believe that we should fight for freedom, I want you to write your name on that index card, your email address, your city, and your zip code. That's all I need. That's going to enlist you into this fight, because I'm going to call on you. And when we take up that index, because not everybody going to fight. Some folks going to pray, and they going to watch. And some folks going to watch, fight, and pray. I'm looking for fighters right now. I'm looking for fighters. If you write your name, your email, your city, and your zip code on that card, we're going to call you to action. Because Pastor Flowers is right. Out of those top 30 zip codes that are feeders to the criminal justice system, 18 of them are in the black and brown community. Out of the schools in those 30 zip codes, 29 of them are black and brown schools. So we have a stake in this fight. I see my good friend and co-laborer, Rafa Barrera, is here. He's going to be doing something with the Hispanic community, and I'll be there supporting him as well out of San Antonio. Because if black and brown legislators are a no vote on freedom, then they're no vote on those folk in that community. So we're going to educate Dr. Carson. We're going to start on the 21st in San Antonio with the town hall meeting. We'd love for you to have a town hall meeting in Houston, because guess what? 4 of those zip codes that are top 30 come out of Houston. 4 come out of San Antonio, 7 come out of Dallas. And we know the legislators who represent the people in those zip codes. They look like me and you. This is a fight for freedom. And I believe that they're going to be there in this fight. I'm going to trust in God that they're going to be there. But if they don't, the fight going to go down anyway. The fight going to be the fight. Got one last question, then we're going to wrap this thing up because we're going to... Let me get one more. Just one, Eric. Just one. Yeah, just one question. One last question, then we're going to wrap everything up. And then we're going to take up, Rafa, make sure we get those index cards. Go right ahead.
Well, good morning.
Pastor.
I'm Pastor Renee Hornbuckle from the Arlington, Texas area. I represent the 13% of the female pastors in Texas, but I'm also sitting between Dallas and Fort Worth, and I'm also the sister of the person who's considered to be the grandmother of the school choice movement, Miss Virginia Fowler Walton Ford. And I am excited to be here today, but I'm also one of those frustrated individuals because I've worked with you all. I've worked with Michael Benjamin. I've worked with Mandy. And I find that our people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. So I think we've done several meetings, and I've actually finally had pastors tell me, well, I don't think I can show up because of political reasons. So I think we've got another issue we have to deal with in terms of helping our leaders in our areas to really understand. I know Michael called, you've called, we've been trying to schedule another meeting, but honestly, I was just exhausted from trying to engage people. So as we take the action, what would you suggest that we begin to do? Because I'm passionate about this. We come from frontline educators, our family, they were on the front lines. When my sister took that initiative on, she was fought by everyone in the educational system. So we believe in freedom, but we do have to educate our people, and like Dr. Carson and Dr. Flowers, we have to make certain that we have the strength to support these initiatives and what we're doing, because many of us are willing. We just cannot get the engagement of other leaders, and we need a new strategy.
I believe in the power of one, Dr. Hornbuckle, and I'm glad you're here because you know you sit right in between Dallas and Fort Worth. So we got Dallas, Fort Worth, Arlington covered, Houston covered, San Antonio covered. Those are the big players right now in terms of feeding into the criminal justice for young black males and females. So I'm looking for that David. See, I'm not looking for the body, I'm looking for the spirit. I'm looking for that spirit of David who's ready to win or die for God. This ain't about the school. This ain't about the state. This is a God thing. This is about fighting for God's people to have freedom. Don't worry, we're gonna be together. Because let me tell you the reason why. At the end of the day, and I know I've seen so many of your sermons. You know, we've read from Genesis to Revelation, and we know how the story ends. I'm looking for the folk who just gonna do their part, because we know God gonna win in the end of the day, at the end of the day. And he's gonna protect the ones who are fighting for him. I've been young, now I'm old. Yet I've never seen the righteous forsaken, nor his seed beg bread. And we're gonna close up, and we're gonna let Pastor Flowers say something. And then after that, is Dr. Moody here? Doc just walked out. After that, you're gonna pray us out of this meet.
With reference to strategy, there is a passage over 1 Samuel 14:6. Jonathan and his armor bearer going up against the Philistines, and he makes this statement in verse 6. He said, "God can save by many, or by few. With the few that you have, begin with them." We have a Zoom meeting that takes place every Thursday. Michael Benjamin out of Florida is kind of our guide through that process. But we're laying out strategies that move us to action in what we do in non-legislative sessions, and then what do we do when the legislature comes in. And so we're partnering with organizations that have manpower, people who will actually go to a district office or actually come to the Capitol during a legislative time. Some of them are sitting in the room this morning. There's a necessity for a strategy to put in place. And if you don't get a flood tide of people, just like Dr. Johnson was saying, the Davids will come to the table. And you start working diligently and strategically with those folks. And as that success happens, success breeds success, it'll start growing. There's a spiritual aspect to this, as he was saying. That spiritual force has to be met with prayer. There's certain things that activity won't break alone. There's certain things that must be broken only by those who petition God in prayer and follow through with that.
Take us out with prayer, Doc.
So, yes, on that point, let's pray. Father, we just bless you and thank you for the awesome in the mighty name of Jesus Christ. Thank you for this divine moment. We believe that education has come, and enlightenment has come. A moment has come for us to grasp what we perhaps did not know before. And if we've known it before, that our grip on this redemptive truth will be strengthened. And we believe that you will provide the right partners, the right attitudes, the right Davids that will come to the table with sling in hand and ready to begin the act of bringing school choice to 5 million students in the state of Texas. Lord, we entrust you in that, and we thank you that you will use pastors and ministry leaders to be the bridge of education that educates the population that the data already says is on the side of this issue anyway. But we ask you, Father, for wisdom and for strategy to pull the stronghold of the enemy down, to pull this blindness down in the name of Jesus, so that the people's eyes may come open and their hearts may arise to this very unique moment in time that we have in the state of Texas. We bless you and we praise you and we thank you for it in Jesus' name.
In Jesus'
Amen.
name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Appreciate you, Doc.
All right, at this time, we're going to take a short break, 5 minutes, and we're going to open up our second panel on entrepreneurship and business development.
Dr. Hayes walking across the campus. Dr. Hayes, Dr. Miller. Them guys were all around us, man. We were in their world. You know what I'm saying? But look what he did for us. You know, we were kids running around in the streets. But guess what, guys? Now we just prepared to fight. Fight what God? I got to run out of here. Okay, guys. Appreciate you, man. We're going to do the thing up in the 21st, and we're going to make sure it's set up. Oh,
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get back started with our second panel. So for those of you who are just coming back in from the bathroom or just joining us, just a reminder, bathrooms are out the door to the left. If you leave, please be reminded the doors are locking behind you. Is that still the case? Okay. So I'm going to start out the second panel with a poem. Many of you may know the individual. It's by an American from the South, born in 1928 in St. Louis, by the name of Maya Angelou. I came very close to meeting Maya at one occasion. It was a great event, Houston Astros, but she fell ill and passed the day I was supposed to meet her. And it always comes back to my mind. So I'm going to read a poem by Maya. The caged bird sings. The caged bird sings with fearful trill of the things unknown but longed for still, and his tone is heard on the distant hill. For the caged bird sings for freedom. That's by Maya Angelou. Now, our moderator that I'll be introducing, Rudy Metier, an immigrant like my family from Haiti. Rudy is the president and executive director of the Texas Black Caucus Foundation. Rudy is the first generation in his family to graduate from college and law school. He's been a tireless advocate in the community, speaking and working on a host of issues, ranging from teaching at-risk children to co-authoring an honor code for the University of Texas, helping form a partnership with local law enforcement and the state bar to address the issue of community policing, and creating pro bono legal advice clinics for the United States military veteran. Rudy, I'd like you to come up and introduce your panel.
Bueller? Okay. So I've got to start by saying, just talking about how the genesis of all this occurred. So for many years, part of the conversation, and those of you who know me very well, has been, from my viewpoint and many others, is that we just aren't having a conversation with one another on issues that really help and address regular folks in our state. We use a lot of hyperbole. We use a lot of discussions about various different ideas and concepts. We use a lot of political narratives. But when it comes to true issues that are affecting people, that's just not what's happening. And so, this is about, I'd say last March. I was at an event for the 100 Black Men. And this was one of the first events that we had that were back in person. And I was sitting there on one side of the room. I saw another tall gentleman, standing on the other side of the room. And that was Richard. We started talking. We spoke for about 40 minutes. Spoke about our backgrounds, ideas, concepts, things that, are important to us, important to our families, faith, everything else that goes with that. And ultimately, from that discussion came a friendship. Now, Richard and I don't agree on everything. We talk about that often. We don't agree on everything right there. But what we do understand and do see the need for is to have that political discourse, to have that understanding and be able to go ahead and have a mutual respect for one another when you're doing so. That's what's really missing in a lot of our conversations now. Now, sitting here when I was listening to the first panel, I don't necessarily agree with everything that was said on the first panel, but I can respect it. I can understand it. It's not illogical. It's not evil. It's not wrong. And when we use words like that, when we use words just to demonize people, that just shuts down any sort of debate or conversation on things. We know we have a problem when it comes to what's going on with their education system in Texas. You're going to see from our foundation, because I'm the executive director for the foundation, you're going to see a report that's coming out in the next couple of weeks on third grade readiness. Our chairman of our board, Chairman Harold Dudden, who unfortunately couldn't be here today because of a death in his family, he sees that as an important tool and an important thing that needs to be addressed. When we're hearing about that school to prison pipeline, which has now become a school to probation system, because they've just converted, from prisons to probation and still keeping folks in the system from it there as well. We know that's a serious issue. So what are we doing to help effectuate that from that level? What are we helping to make sure that we have tools and ideas and concepts to make sure these kids have an ability to succeed? And that's where, from Rich and I's standpoint, what I see, when we're talking about workforce, when we're talking about workforce development, we're talking about giving skill sets and opportunity for kids to succeed, an opportunity for people to upskill themselves. Because I think oftentimes we just think of students, and we're not just thinking of people who are making mid-career accesses. But when we have that discussion, what you're going to see in our panel today is that you're going to see some hindrances to that. You're going to see some things that are in the system that, that block that opportunity for that change to happen. But what's good about that is that we're going to be able to identify them. We're going to be able to go ahead and say, okay, wait a minute, okay, that's a hindrance. And if those things are policy-driven, well, we're the ones who go ahead and make policy. We're the ones, the reasons, put folks in action to go ahead and make sure that they represent our values and our truths. One of the things I saw very early on, and I always appreciate, was that I remember years ago, Miss T, Sophronia Thompson, coming to the TPPF events over and over and over again. She didn't necessarily agree with everything that was being said, but she loved the engagement, and she loved the ability for the ideas to go ahead and happen with that. When I brought up this concept to my board of directors on the foundation, they were excited about that. They were excited to see, okay, let's see what we can do about engagement, about going ahead and talking about these ideas and focus for. Because we know for the fact that when we talk about workforce and economic development, that is life-changing. That can make a demonstrative difference in these skill sets. That puts real money in the pockets of people who can go ahead and alter their careers and help make a difference in people's families moving forward. And so when you're listening to this panel and you're seeing these folks have this conversation today, keep that in mind. That, listen, we don't have to agree on the issues. We don't have to go ahead and focus on these things. But when we can actually come together, I feel like we have, you're talking to a kid who, parents of Haitian immigrants, went to Catholic school from preschool through 12th grade. The nuns beat it into me. A sense of belonging, a sense of a common good for society. My uncle came to this country to join the U.S. Army just because he saw what it had done in the world, how it made a difference in the world from there. That was my first impression of what the armed forces was and what this country can be. He saw what this country can achieve. And that's the focus that we need to have today. And that's the excitement that I want to see that is coming from today. And that's why. So when we're talking about our panel, I'm going to go ahead and ask each of them to come on here. They're going to introduce themselves. But keep that in mind and keep that focus in mind when we're having that conversation about what we can do, what goals can be accomplished, and what things are being done that, frankly, if we give them a little more attention, it could be brought in a broader level. So I want to start, first of all, with Commissioner Aaron Demerson. Sit right here. Ms. Benny Coleman. And if you didn't notice, so I guess something else I should say too is that I'm also a city council member for the city of Pflugerville. And you have some of those folks who live in your city that, they're always going to let you know what they think, no matter what. That man right there, Quincy Dunlap, come on over. Oh, if you didn't notice, yes, all my debt and all my degrees come from the University of Texas. Undergrad, law school, public policy school. So Commissioner Demerson, you've been a very, very important figure in my life in a variety of different roles. I don't think people know enough, frankly, what you've done and how you've accomplished what you're doing. If you can just give a quick background about who you are and what you're doing, where you come from.
First of all, thank you for the opportunity, Rudy, and with Dr. Johnson, my fraternity brother, somewhere around here, but really just congratulate you guys on doing what we're doing now. When I was coming over here, I was driving with Bonnie. Her husband's a big Longhorns fan, and he can't wait. And I said, well, you can't wait till you meet Rudy because he's just as much of a Longhorns fan. And so Rudy's decked out in his orange and ready to roll as they play Alabama this this weekend. But I'm delighted to be on this panel today to join with my good friend Quincy Dunlap, the Austin Area Urban League, doing a phenomenal job there, and then Beanie Coleman, who's taking on some other efforts, and you're going to hear about some of the work that she's doing as well in that space, and just real proud of what you guys have been able to do and what you're doing here in Austin that also impacts our state as well. And then Rudy, you've talked. I mean, I don't have to say anything. You're taking care of business as always. I've been privileged to be here in Austin for a while, worked with Governor Perry, even before then, actually working with the Texas Tomorrow Fund. That's a student prepaid tuition program. And so I'll go back. I managed that program a while back under Carol Keaton, Strayhorn, Rolander at one point, and then Chancellor Sharp had started that program at the Comptroller's office, went to the governor's office to head up or to be a part of the the economic development team. And so eventually working under Governor Perry, heading up the Texas Economic Development and Tourism team for a number of years, where we traveled the world really to showcase the best state in the nation in what we have as it relates to a business climate. And so all the job creation that's taken place throughout the state, the announcements that you hear, we've had some work in that stead in a big way throughout the state. And then recently going over to the workforce side, where we're basically making sure that we have a good business climate so that businesses in our state won't look at another state, that they'll stay here in our great state of Texas to make a difference. And so we get to work on that side to make sure that that we're retaining and recruiting businesses to our state from that standpoint. And then lastly, Texas Interns Unite initiative that I'll talk about a little bit later on. We're really doing some good work in that space where we're trying to bring together intern opportunities with employers that are out there, internship opportunities for employers. But delighted to be a part of this panel. Look forward to the discussion. And that's kind of a short version. Have been blessed to do a lot in the state as it relates to job creation and all the announcements that are out there. But my biggest goal is to make sure that we're sharing that so that it's a benefit to others that can receive it and do even more with it.
Ms. Coleman.
Hi, I'm Beanie Coleman. I'm the CEO of 212 Catalyst, which is a nonprofit consulting agency that I started in 2019, and Mr. Demison actually reminded me, because I don't think of this a lot, that I'm a small business owner, actually, speaking on the workforce panel. But either way, my history kind of goes back 28 years of, I had a love for business. I always have. I have an MBA. And at the same time, around the age of 18, 19, I played volleyball at UT. Whoop, whoop. So here we go. But through the team, I was introduced to someone who introduced me to a summer camp, actually, called Kids Across America. It's in the Ozarks, southern Missouri, and that started me working with young people, which had never been on my radar. And sure enough, over the years, that kept pulling me. That was something that kept pulling me, this community work. Even as I pursued and enjoyed business endeavors. And so I'm kind of this fusion. I went from the front line to the programs to the systems level. I've consulted on behalf of the Texas Education Agency, monitoring their 21st Century Community Learning Centers grants across the state. And now currently, actually, their Summer Learning Initiative, which came out of the last House bill, as well as have worked with a variety of school districts, a ton of nonprofits. I kind of know them all. I'm in the partnership space, so certainly in Central Texas and even beyond, I have just done a lot. So 212 Catalyst, what we do is help. Our mission is literally to help organizations and initiatives make a positive impact in society. So wherever people are coming together, groups, it doesn't matter if it's health, education, STEM, workforce, or any of that. It's agnostic of the topic area because we're all often working with the same communities in mind, and there's a lot of intersectionality between these different issue areas. So I kind of sit as an intermediary with 212 and help grease the wheels, whatever people need, from strategy to operational support, the finance, the data, which those stewardship elements that are so important to groups and nonprofits that want funding. Everyone comes to me wanting funding, wanting me to help with that. But I always have to make sure that on the back end, you're doing the things you need to do, the ugly stuff, so to speak, but that ensures sustainability and that shows outcomes as well. So I'm a little bit geeky and nerdy in that way. I get into the data and all of that, but just love helping however I can.
Mr. Dunlap.
Well, I'm in both of their fan clubs, so I watch their work very closely and from afar. And if I had to put a phrase on describing the two of them, it's the weak cause riots and the strong move in silence. When these two move, things happen. I'm a direct product of their movement from close and afar. So whether y'all know it or not, I'm paying attention. I have the privilege and honor of serving Austin and Central Texas as the president and CEO of the Austin Area Urban League. That's the title, and so what, right? I'm a purpose-driven servant leader. That is what I do day to day. Sometimes I'm very hard and rigid. Sometimes I'm a little bit flexible. But I'm always purpose-driven to the assignment that God has placed me here in Central Texas to do. I'm unapologetic about it. If you don't like what I'm doing, then you don't have to talk to me or support the Urban League. But it's ordained by God what we are doing for his people in this time that is now. So I appreciate the mentorship and sometimes the sponsorship I get from Aaron, and I appreciate those calls or those taps on the shoulders that I get from Beanie to pay attention to this. It's very important that I get that as a new leader in Austin to understand the culture and the response that the people need, right, from the Urban League. And it's important that we serve the way it is intended that we serve. So I'm going to be short and brief on that. I've been here about 5 years. It'll be 5 years in January, and I've seen some of the changes. I got a great team over there, and just shout out to the Urban League team on both sides of the room. They always show up to serve, and a great leader is only as good as his supporting cast. So I'm a great leader because I got a great supporting cast. So I want to acknowledge them in everything that I do.
So I'm going to start with you, Commissioner Demerson. I remember sitting out here in this audience last year when on the panel discussion we had Chairman Harold Dudden, Senator Boris Miles, and Senator West, and they were talking about economic empowerment for the black community in Texas. In particular, they talked about small businesses and workforce demands and the lack of access to the information to get to folks to relate from there. I know that if anyone's paid attention to this man's LinkedIn account or what's going on over here, this man is going around Texas letting folks know what's available and what's going from that. What have you seen in your travels that will help bridge that gap to folks to be able to understand what's out there and what is?
Yes, so what I'm most excited about are the opportunities. I think we're all blessed to be in positions to be able to do a lot, but the opportunities that exist, and particularly the African American community, is to collaborate and to connect. There's tons of information. I just came from San Marcos. Bonnie and I were coming from San Marcos, where you had 400 or 500 businesses out there at a session, small to mid-sized business, learning about employment law. And so the ability for me to do something like that with Charles O'Neill in the team, making sure that we're connecting in that regard and sharing information. It is so much information out there that's so powerful, and there are opportunities for us to really collaborate to do that. I'm getting the word out in a lot of ways, but I want to do even more from that standpoint. Once we get to the table with that, we're well on our way. I mean, it's pretty amazing because some of the programs are very user-friendly. There are programs that are available. There are programs that are put in place to make a difference, and sometimes I think just the lack of getting there. And so anytime I have an opportunity to go out to the various chambers of commerce, and when we're talking about an African American Chamber of Commerce and the like, I'm delighted to share information and even get more excited when I see the results that come from that. I talk about three things: bringing together the world's workforce, economic development, and education. Workforce, economic development, and education. When Quincy came on board, I had a conversation with them quick about some of the programs that we have at the workforce and the like, and the opportunities that I think the Austin Area Urban League could benefit from in the citizens. Ultimately, it's not the organization, but it's the individuals that are receiving the training. Well, Quincy jumped right on that, understood from the standpoint that the due diligence that's involved, the professionalism that's involved, and then taking care of business in that regard. His organization's been able to do that, and they're going to be doing even more down the line. But that's the opportunity when you have information, somebody gets it, they understand it, and if it fits what they're doing, then you make that work. We're talking about small business, and I'm going to make my comments quick because I know we have limited time. Small businesses right now. We have a program that's called Skills for Small Business. That's a program where you come in. If I'm here, say Rudy owns a business, we work for Rudy, and Rudy says, Aaron, I need you to go brush up on your Spanish-speaking skills. We're getting a heavy influx of Hispanics to speak the language, brush up on that. Beanie, you need to go brush up on your CAD design, or Quincy, your Excel. If we're here in Austin, we can go over to Austin Community College, look at their course curriculum catalog, and the state pays for that. So that's a small business for Rudy. If he's owned this company, I'm brushing up my skills from that standpoint. It's not a cost to him. It's a scholarship to me in a sense. I'm brushing up. There's a win-win situation. That's a simple program, a 1- or 2-page application called the Skills for Small Business. Just imagine if folks are taking advantage of those opportunities. You're not only helping your business, but you're helping that individual as well. And that's just one of many programs that are out there. And so spreading that word, getting it out there, you and Dr. Johnson coming up with a session like this that allows us to get the word out makes all the sense in the world. I have members of our team, Willette Wallace, that's over there, the executive assistant in the office, runs everything from that standpoint. And then Kimberly Bradford Brown, who's deputy chief of staff on our team. Kimberly came to the team because she has 20 plus years of workforce experience, worked for the executive director for a number of years. So I'm fortunate to have her on my team. And then Bonnie Downs, the communications manager as well. Brian Snoddy's in the room. Brian is here, represents the Civil Rights Division at the Workforce Commission. Another good, solid contact that's there for anything along those lines. And then Blake Roach. Where's Blake? Blake is here from the governor's appointments office. Blake's over there, chief contact, so that if any individuals are looking for appointment opportunities, these are the individuals that you would see to contact to make sure that we're able to get on board, able to get to a point where we're making a difference from that standpoint based on whatever your needs and desires are from that standpoint. But Blake, thanks for joining us from the appointments office as well. Those individuals can only come together when folks like Rudy and Dr. Johnson and the TPPF are putting on events like this so that we can, as Rudy said, start the dialogue, continue the dialogue. It's not like we haven't been doing this already, but we're going to move towards action. And that's why I love working with Beanie and Quincy, because it's not just talk, it's moving towards action. Lastly, I remember challenging the Austin, what's the name of the leadership group, the leadership?
African American Leadership Institute.
Yeah, AALI. And they pulled this group together, something that was a thought years ago, and I was fortunate to be talking with Danielle when it was some of these things were in their minds years ago. But they asked me to talk about workforce. And so one of the things was when you look at the unemployment rates in Texas, they may be 4%. African American community, they're always higher. So the question is why? And let's set a goal that if it's double that within the community, how do we come a year from now and look at what we've done to address those issues to lower it from that standpoint? Is it lack of training? Is it lack of education? Is it lack of jobs? Or is it just lack of someone not providing the opportunity? Drill down to what that is so that we can make a difference. And so I like the actionable part of the panelists that we have here, and Rudy, yourself as well. But I think it goes back to collaborating, making sure that we're getting information out and not assuming that someone knows what's out there, that we really work hard to make sure that we're getting the information out. And then if you see someone like myself making a phone call, Commissioner Demerson, love for you to come out to talk, love for you to bring the team out, because we can do that. We can bring folks out where you have a question, you have a comment. I don't know what's happening in child care. $6 billion that we've had that's out there on the child care side. And we should be, there are questions, we're not getting any of it. Well, let's find out why. Let's find out what's out there, and let's take it, and we have the ability to do just that.
Well, you got a couple of things I want to follow up on, but I'm gonna follow up through them. Let me start with Quincy first. One of the things you heard your commissioner talk about is action and people knowing what you're doing. Oftentimes when I hear people speak about the Urban League, they look at y'all and focus y'all from a civil rights side. Can you speak to the audience a little bit more about what you're doing, not just on civil rights, but on economic development, and how workforce and everything else that the programming ideas and services you're making in the community to make a demonstrative difference?
So the Austin Area Urban League has 5 empowerment pillars, that being education and youth development, housing and community development, workforce and career development, the workforce team here, health and wellness, and justice and advocacy. And when you think about interconnectivity, none of those are mutually exclusive. They are all interconnected in a very specific way. We provide programs, services, and special initiatives under those 5 empowerment pillars, and we have a brother or sister access us in very different ways. So different groups of stakeholders, whether you come to receive a program, supporting a program, service, or initiative, or if you come to give some money. Shameless plug, wink, wink, right? A nonprofit, wink, wink, charitable organization. So regardless of where you come from, we meet you where you are in order to reinvest into people. Workforce and career development on the programming side leads to some of what we do in entrepreneurship. And I want to set a tone about the entrepreneurial mindset. You cannot achieve anything unless you have an entrepreneurial mindset, right? So in order to achieve success in the educational environment, that entrepreneurial mindset has to set in, and you have to action it, right? That leads to maybe some type of credentialing or some understanding of how do I access the right information about a small business. All large businesses started as small businesses, right? So when we think about how to solve some of the problems in society, we work directly through a flow, through education, which is the access of information and then actioning it. Then that goes into entrepreneurship. Then there's a workforce development component to it, to where most of our, the largest part of our employment sector is done by small businesses. 3 to 5 employers, and I heard you talk about the 500. If you multiply that times 3, that's 1,500 employees that we're talking about that is going to receive some kind of information based off of what their business leaders receive today. So it's making that connectivity and then actioning that through programs, services, and special initiatives through either workforce or entrepreneurship or education and youth development, it creates this cycle of success. When the lowest among us have success, everybody has an elevated quality of life. At the end of the day, the work that the Urban League provides, the services, programs, and special initiatives, it's about elevating the quality of life for all the individuals that we encounter. And that looks different for different stakeholders that come to the table, but we meet them where they are, and then we support and then take that feedback, because the only way to get better is to receive constructive criticism and then action it.
You know, right, we have a saying at the foundation that we say we support Black Texans, which uplifts all Texans. And I think that oftentimes we have conversations where we're not understanding the intricacies, the interlocality between folks, you know, on the different issues. You know, we ascribe them to a certain segment of group, which, I mean, to be frank, disproportionately may affect a certain aspect of society. But it doesn't mean that if uplifting, supporting all, you know, a certain aspect of society supports and benefits all society, that makes a big difference in what they're doing. And Benny, that leads me to something that I wanted to talk to you about. Is that, so you, just like you said, you mentioned yourself, you're like, wait a minute, I am a small business. And, you know, in doing so, you know, the last several years, if anything, what they've shown is that small businesses are the backbone of our economy. What have you seen, you know, navigating these waters during the pandemic and, you know, different services or opportunities and different tactics to help make sure that you're still able to succeed, you know, as a small business, while at the same time having access to services and ideas that, as Commissioner Demerson says, are out there for businesses to thrive?
For one, just adopting a flexible mindset. The good thing about small business is you're a little more nimble often, and quite honestly, I think that nimbleness just comes from not having to navigate so many other people who are being rigid, because the reason a large business may be rigid is just the people in it making decisions to not be flexible, right, in many cases. So for instance, pandemic and all, the whole virtual style workflow and style, we were already doing that because, well, we're a consultancy. We don't need to be feet, you know, in a space together unless we just need to work together from time to time, all in one place, or we're doing an event. So some of those things, we were already using technology, leveraging that in order to just be more efficient and effective. And it's enabled us, like, we were already ready for the pandemic. Then when it hit, we're like, okay, yeah, this is just what we've been doing. And we were able to then also continue to help others. Like, we launched ALI, the African American Leadership Institute, in the pandemic, virtually, because we're comfortable Zooming around and facilitating.
Could you
things.
expand a little bit what ALI is? Because I think just
Yes.
pushing your website. So this is a pretty big deal.
Yes, so and this came to me, I still can almost consider Heath or Donnell like a client, but he is sort of a visionary in the Austin area and has launched multiple big initiatives and had been carrying this idea around for African American Leadership Institute, or Ali. That's a play on words. Yes, Muhammad Ali. For about 20 years since he attended Leadership Austin. And if you're familiar with Leadership Austin or Leadership Dallas, like all these groups that are around the country that basically bring together a group of leaders for community building and taking deep dives into issue areas that are impacting that local ecosystem, and then discussing those, and and then talking about what do we do in order to get more involved and informed. So he did Leadership Austin. And there was just talk like, we need one of these for the Black community. And there was a Hispanic Austin Leadership that launched a little bit after that, but still had not been one of these. So he carried that torch for 20 years and then he emailed me out of nowhere shortly after I'd started 212 Catalyst, and was one of the many that come to me with an idea and said, I want to get this thing going. Been having trouble, and we got it going, and basically by just connecting it also to some serious issues in Austin, which is we have a declining Black population. It's been declining as a percentage for 45 years straight. That's unique in terms of any U.S. city. Austin is the only one where the Black population is declining as a percentage while the overall population is growing. So that's an indicator of an issue. At the same time, employers understand that issue from the side of retention. They're able to recruit Black professionals to Austin. They're like, we don't have a problem with that, but they leave. Why do they leave? And they've been scratching their heads for years about that issue. And I'm like, these all go together. And we know, at the time, we knew anecdotally, I would say, that first thing people ask here when they get to Austin is, we're Black people.
Yep.
Right? We're Black people. Where do we go? What are the, and there's never been a good answer. I've been here 28 years. It's the first question I asked. And every Black person I met who's come from somewhere says the same thing. So we knew that anecdotally. Now we have a report. We've got the data, back to the geeky data side, right? We partnered with a group called Measure, Mimi Stiles, who's wonderful, and they have a community-led process for developing the actual instrument, the survey instrument itself and the tools. And because it was designed by us, we asked the right questions. And lack of belonging rivals affordability in terms of why Black people leave Austin. And that was 375 respondents to that survey, so we got the firsthand data. Now, in a report also detailing the history of from the moment the first Black person got to Austin, what is our history, and all these policies and things that have moved us around and kept us displaced. So Ali is this connection hub to bring us together, for one, so we just connect as a community, we find each other, but it also does the equipping, the sharing of the knowledge about these different issue areas as it relates to us, and then connects us to the broader decision-making groups. So it's like, yes, we're connecting Black leaders to Black leaders, and at the same time, we're letting them know this is the commission that makes the decision on this. These are the people, like we brought in Commissioner Demerson and Quincy and Rudy, we've engaged everyone to bring them in, like, these are the people that work in these spaces. This is where you show up at a board meeting if you're interested in education or CAT Metro or, you know, whatever else the issue is, so that they can get involved. And I'm really happy to say that over half, and it keeps growing, of the inaugural cohort did end up joining some kind of board or advisory group or decision-making group as a result of their experience in Ali. And some of them multiple, like some of them are like gangbusters on fire, like they've joined 4 or 5, and you know, it's just sparked something inside of them. And when you have that ownership, because your voice is being listened to and you're impacting community decisions that are even broader, that's what a leader needs to feel like this is home. And we also have influenced, there were about a third of the first cohort that were considering leaving Austin, and Ali increased their resolve to stay.
Well, you know, one of the things that was really surprising to me in law school was when I took my estate planning class, and I learned about trust. And I asked my professor, I was like, wait, so this is legal? I can put money in here, designate this person right here, and, you know, we can do this and that, and it bypasses taxes? And they're like, yeah, absolutely. And it caused an epiphany in me saying, you know, what's happening oftentimes in this country is there's not a certain race, gender, equity, or anything like that smarter than another. It's access to knowledge. And if you don't know, you don't know. And as you know, as Ms. Coleman was just talking about here, you know, people most often not, they just don't know. What you heard about Commissioner Demerson saying, hey, listen, let's get with people to understand. They just don't know. And along those lines, Quincy, I want to highlight something you said, which I think that most people won't know. And you mentioned it in passing. You said housing in regards to the Urban League. What unique thing is the Urban League doing in regards to housing right now that, you know, in a lot of ways I think is pioneering some of the issues that Benny brought up regarding Black Flight? I call it Black Float, you know, in the city of Austin, even though I will mention that Pflugerville has the largest black population in Central Texas with a median income number 1 and number 2. So thank you for all the folks coming to Pflugerville. But go ahead. Tell me about that.
There's a couple of things moving in that space from an Urban League perspective. For those of you who don't know, if you watch City Council or read any of the newspapers, you've seen articles about us getting a shelter. Again, it's positioning the Urban League to serve. Then when you think through how does that tie to workforce and career development, the shelter is going to employ X amount of people, right? But inside of that, there are other supports built to support our team members and the residents. Then when you think about what else is happening, we had the ARP money come down, right? That's the American Recovery Act. That money, billions and billions of dollars to come down. And part of what we were able to do with the bureaucracy at the city and the county level is position for a Black-led, Black-focused organization to actually develop some housing. Permanent supportive housing the brothers and sisters can move into after they go through a series of support mechanisms to get them ready for this process. Sustainable housing is not just something you move into. It's a process. Whether you sign in a lease or whether you are purchasing, you have to have an entrepreneurial mindset because you don't know anything about the housing association before you buy that house. And then you get that first bill saying you ain't paid for 3 months. And you're like, a housing association? But again, that's the surprises of entrepreneurship because there's always something that's going to come up. So how do we, through our stack model, we educate brothers and sisters on these things, whether they are leasing or owning, and we meet them where they are in this process, right? So it's having an end-to-end solution that's not just putting warm bodies in a shelter, right? A covered dwelling. How do you get them the right information, right? In that housing space. Then there's going to be another phase to it, but y'all know me, I just spoke about moving in silence. I'm not going to tell you until you see it done.
You know, you talked about the partnerships and the ideas of local government and how it's important to be able to go and participate in there. Hold people accountable and see where those dollars are going, because more often than not, people aren't paying attention to what goes on with those dollars at the local government level. Commissioner Demerson, you talked about, at the state level, and we're talking about, different funding, things that are going on, legislation and ideas regarding that. What do you see as a barrier, regarding that ability to be able to get that information, get that money to the folks, or get those services to the people that need it, at those levels? Are those actually legislative barriers, or are they barriers, of our own making?
I think it could probably be a combination if you're looking at an overall picture, but I like what Quincy says, and I think that's a model that we're taking, going to where the needs are. You're meeting them where they are. I was in San Antonio just about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and there's a food bank. And so you have a food bank, and those are huge all over. Well, we put a workforce solutions office in the food bank. Very creative, because if a person's looking for food, they may need access to a job or a career and the like. And then Google has an office upstairs where they're helping them with LinkedIn pages and resumes and the like. And so going to where the needs are, I've seen some of the workforce solution offices actually setting up shop across the street from a large apartment complex where you're watching folks that probably need employment opportunities. Well, all they have to do is walk across the street now and talk about some of those career opportunities that are out there. And so those are some of the innovative approaches that are out there, that barriers where if you couldn't get to the place because you didn't have transportation or there's not a bus line along those lines, we have to work a little bit smarter to go to where the needs are. And I like Quincy's aspect there. Getting the information out is something that's key. I think sometimes you mentioned the word trust from that standpoint, and so sometimes we may not have a trust of government in a sense, or these programs probably don't work from that standpoint. And so we need to do what we can to make sure that we're showing some of the best practices and the successes that have happened from that standpoint. When Beanie's talking about Ali and what they're doing, that's a model for other communities to pick up on. How did you guys do that? Come pick the brains or so that you can do the same thing in your respective community, and then we're well on our way from that standpoint. But trust and getting the word out is where we need to go, and basically the leaders that we are, when Beanie's group, when they're basically connecting individuals, and I've had members of the organization, the cohorts that have come out that have already circled back with me in ways where they're wanting to take it to even different levels, and we're connecting. And so that's the bridge that keeps on happening and keeps on giving from that standpoint. That can be replicated in other communities as well. And the more we get out there, we start taking down the windows of distrust. When Quincy and his team took on this self-sufficiency fund or other initiatives that they may be working on from that standpoint, is basically looking at it in overcoming the challenges that are out there and then getting it to results. And so eliminating the trust, getting the word out, and then on my side, I need to just continue to connect and continue to invite and then get to the right people at one point to say, hey, I've invited this person to this thing. These are opportunities. They're not taking advantage of it. When we're introducing you to Blake Roach over there, the appointment side, that's a person on the appointment side that if you're looking for appointments within the state government structure where you go on those boards, and so those are connectors that are there because they're wanting people to serve from that standpoint, and we just have the opportunity to do just that.
One of the things that you just highlighted, and I want to make sure I'm clear with everybody on this, why I thought these three would be phenomenal on this panel. Oftentimes when we're trying to find solutions to these issues, I don't think people realize that those solutions are folks in our own community. Folks who understand, can relate to these issues. Because how many times have we been in a conversation, in different rooms and aspects, and all of a sudden you hear everyone say something and you're like, wait a minute, that's not exactly the way you should look at it, or have you thought about this perspective right here? And it's not because someone's ignorant and that they're dumb or anything like that. It's that they just don't know. And so when you have crazy concept, diverse groups, diverse voices in these conversations, in these spheres of influence, it changes the flow of what can or can not be accomplished. And you have that. You're seeing that right here. You're seeing this in the room right here as well, that we have the solutions to these issues right there. It's just getting the information and flows out there from that. Along those lines, one of the issues that we've seen, and Benny, I would want you to comment on this because I know this is key, is that we're seeing that there's a certain aspect of our workforce who hasn't returned because of the pandemic. And there's relating that to what they're saying is childcare. Now, can you explain to us why does childcare have anything to do with workforce and why that would be an issue?
Well, the short answer, because a parent must have a place for their child to be that is quality as well, that they can feel comfortable, that good things are happening there while they're at work in order for them to be productive in the workforce. And so many parents, and especially the types of jobs that are coming, like I know for Central Texas, lots of manufacturing and different, non-traditional hours, things that require 12-hour shifts, overnight, weekends. We need childcare to cover these non-traditional. It can't just continue to be this, 7 to 6 kind of a model. It's not working for so many parents. Parents want to work, and at the same time, they're not going to let their children just be anywhere. Matter of fact, in Texas, you can still be charged for child abandonment if your child is up to age 15. So we're not even just talking early in babies, early childhood, which of course that's a huge sector and a lot of what's being funded, but we're really talking up the pipeline. We should be talking about out of school time programs. There's a whole statewide coordinating agency, TexPost, the Texas Partnership for Out of School Time, that's been trying to advocate for a long time for after school funding, and that includes not just after school hours, but weekends, holidays, summer programs like the Summer Learning Initiative. Those things help parents, though, to know that their children are in not only a safe place, but a place where they're actually learning, and it's an opportunity for us to cultivate our workforce of tomorrow. Like, you can do anything during these after school programs and out of school time that you want. It doesn't have to be a holding tank for kids. It shouldn't be, right? We should be maximizing that. We can start exposing young children to career options that we need them to understand about, that we need them to feel when they grow up. Older youth, we can start training them. I've seen after school programs in rural areas where young people are learning welding. They're learning how to take care of livestock that's relevant to their local economy. And they're using after school and out of school time programs in order to do this. Similar in other areas, we're teaching technology skills. We're getting kids certified with certifications before they even get out of high school. And I can tell you, the 28 years of me working with youth can tell you that a young person who's in high school, their main 2 priorities are thinking about college and or work. Matter of fact, a lot of them are thinking about they need work while still in high school. You do those 2 things, they don't need all this other stuff as much. Sure, they like to have a good time, but they really are focused on those things, helping the family. And if you can do something that even entrepreneurship, something that even starts to get them paid, like the Dell Certified Technician Student Tech Crew program, they can be paid and be certified Dell technicians as high school students, as a side gig, learning. And then of course we have all these dual, ACC and which is Austin Community College, and different groups that, young people graduate from high school already with an associate's degree, and and that can also be bolstered through after school. They could get the job training piece, they could get the learning part, possibly during the school day. They could get the practice, like learning how to drive a forklift or whatever it is. I mean, I've seen these partnerships, though, and when people really start to think in these ways, then also childcare is no longer just childcare, like, oh, it's daycare, it's where I keep my kid. It becomes a mechanism for workforce development as well.
Boy, what a key point. So my oldest daughter, she's at Howard University now. Yes, she got in the University of Texas. Don't get me started about her going up to Howard. But it's Howard, all right, it is what it is. But when you spoke about the holding cell, right? So when she was in 4th grade, we had in the neighborhood, we had a Mandarin school that was right next to a Taekwondo studio. And literally, they would make sure she did her schoolwork, and then they would teach her some Mandarin. Well, she got so good at Mandarin, they started to ask us, well, are you practicing Mandarin at home? We're like, listen, we don't even know what these things look like, what you're trying to say or anything else. They were no whatsoever. And now at Howard, that's what she's doing with. She's using her Mandarin and, and going with that. She wants to go overseas and work on these things. So, I mean, to hear about the need, so there's an issue regarding the barrier for, particularly females returning back to the workforce because of the lack of quality child care. But to be able to make that malleable enough to give them a skill set to these young women and men that they can use and proceed on, that's huge. And, Commissioner Demerson, I know that y'all just have a little bit to do about child care over here as well. And, can you expand about, y'all's role and what you have done to help make sure that some of these barriers and some of these opportunities are made available for people who can't see?
Yeah, I think as Beanie was talking, the child care space just huge. So because of the limited time, I'll throw this out. If anybody has any questions as it relates to child care is under the Texas Workforce Commission. And so we get out to talk to your respective communities about what's happening out there, the amount of money that's been put into child care. As a matter of fact, just yesterday, I was in a meeting with Bright Horizons, one of that name, if you look at that in terms of the child care space and what they're doing, and also Stewart, I can't think of his last name, but they have a nannies company, and they were talking about this backup child care. I had not been introduced to that concept, but a lot of these companies that are using that backup child care that's out there. You think about the professional baseball, basketball teams or so, there's child care that's taking place within those operations that these companies are actually utilizing. And so there's a lot of things in that child care space that some of us are probably familiar with, may not be familiar with as well. A lot of the companies right now are looking at, they've been doing it for quite some time with this backup child care to meet those flexibility opportunities when you have the third shift, the different hours or so. And so a lot of work that's been done within that space. And then that goes back to the information again. I was privileged and blessed to be in this position, so I get access to a lot of things that are happening, and I'm sitting down there with individuals, the lady who actually started Bright Horizons and what they're doing, that's information flow that's coming out. Allison, I get her last name in our office, was in that meeting as well. These are the subject matter experts on that whole child care space. These are individuals coming to us trying to find out about what's happening in the child care space, and we're providing that information. That information is available to our community as well. And so it's just a matter of asking, because there's a lot of things taking place in that space. And as Rudy mentioned, it's not because we're not able to handle it, can't do it or so, but access to the information and coming in asking the questions. There's not a dumb question there. How does this work? I wouldn't have ever known about the backup child care and how big that is. Still kind of understanding it and watching companies like USAA, Dell Computers, Samsung, all these guys are involved in child care spaces that we may not have even known about from that standpoint, and they're addressing it, but they're wanting to do more. Women were impacted big time, especially on the restaurant side. The Texas Restaurant Association had a lot of women that couldn't go back to work, weren't going back to work because of the lack of child care. That's a whole other area that we're looking at trying to address, where it's not the jobs are not paying as much from that standpoint. So can you afford child care? So what can be done from that standpoint? Can the federal government dollars that are coming down subsidize anything? Finding out the answers. Sometimes there's strings attached to those dollars. There are guidelines attached to it, and this is what you can or can't do. But we've stretched in big ways. But anything dealing with child care, if there are any interests out there, because it's so large of an area, we can get the answers right to you. You can convene a virtual meeting if you're in a particular region and you want to bring child care folks together to talk to our attorneys, to talk to the folks on the child care side. That's accessible, that's available. And so when someone comes to you and saying, we don't know, or we can't find out, or there's nothing there, there is. And so it's just a phone call away. And the folks up here, Rudy, Dr. Johnson, the whole team, a lot of times the way this works, if I have a question, or if someone has a question or a need, they know how to send them over. Contact Demerson over there, and he'll help you out. Contact Rudy from that standpoint, or Quincy or Beanie, and they'll get you to the proper place. What we have to do is be responsive, though. That's the part. When I call somebody at Dell Computer, I'm sending a student over there to my contact at Dell. I don't need them going through, taking them through the ringer and all these other things. We need to be actionable and take care of business. That's the way we move the ball. And so when this question about child care comes up, If there's anybody in here that has a question about child care, I've put it out there. It's basically their answers are there. And if you need access to that information, it's appointed by Governor Abbott in that point. And I always say that he's given us the green light to take care of business, pretty much to get the word out there, because at the end of the day, we want folks to be successful in our state. If that business is successful, they're going to be able to employ folks. If that parent is in a position to have access to quality child care that's out there, we're in a position to do it. Lastly, I have 2 boys. They came through the child care system as well, and I was able to speak at a child care conference about a month ago, and actually two times, in basically kind of had to reflect back on their start was at the child care center, Circle C Child Care, watching them there. They went from that point, and they're both college graduates and out gainfully employed, off the payroll right now. One a year and 3 months.
God is good.
Yeah, a year and 3 months off the payroll, and the other one's about a month or 2 months off the payroll. But he called me and said, "Dad, I don't know about this 8 to 5 thing." You go to work. Anyway, it's another story. But Matthew had to get him squared away. But it all started at a child care center. And so the biggest advocates for that child care center is basically the results that we see there. That's the importance of it, because there's a difference. But anything we can do in that space, this, again, time out for the talk. It's about the action behind it. And if there's a question or point that you want to talk about as it relates to child care, we have the experts, the people that are involved in it, in the opportunities from a business standpoint. If you're in business trying to make money to do something, or you have a product or a service in that space, that's open and available. And so I see you're kind of getting up or whatever, so I'm going to kind of cut it off. So, but anyway, that's out there. And then I'm going to run over this, and then you don't have to ask me any other questions. I wanted to make sure we're connecting. So Dorian Cockrell, J.P. Morgan Chase, responsible for Houston, San Antonio, Austin in the philanthropic space. And so I'm getting that to Quincy and Beanie as well. Dorian's asking me questions about Aaron, who's doing this, who's doing that. He's in a position to get out there as a foundation to connect in the community, to make things happen. He's asking me, who's doing this, who's doing that, and the like. And so we need to be sharing that information, because the work that you guys are doing, it can connect there. Child care, we hit governor's office at small business conferences throughout the state. That can be in your respective community as well. Foster care, transitioning foster youth. I'm big in that space on that side, making sure that they have opportunities. And then just came from an event, Opportunity Youth, 16 to 24. That's the word out there, Opportunity Youth, and a whole discussion on that space. And then lastly, Texas Interns Unite. If you're interested in trying to make sure that your college students or high school students have internship opportunities, contact our office, because we want to help in that space in big ways. We're connecting and making sure that we're not only just talking, but we're putting action behind whatever it is that we have, and we're blessed to be in these positions to do just that.
And I love what you're saying about action, and in those different spheres. I know for a fact that the caucus, when you talk about Chairwoman Collier, talking about hub businesses, and Senator West, and Representative Dunn, and and Representative Sherman out there in Dallas too as well, trying to, Carl, they're doing good things on those aspects, but it's a domino effect, just like you said. If you're able to have a good quality job, then you're going to be able to go ahead and have a good quality child care. And then in turn, they're going to have a good quality education. And it's all circular. It all comes together on these aspects. Some of these issues you're going to hear about later on today. I can't wait till the lunch discussion when you hear about the Clean Slate program. And then you hear later about the foster care and, things that we can or can't do to ground the foster care system. So we have, I guess I should have known this group.
10 minutes of questions.
Yeah. I should have known this group would keep talking over here. So we have 10 minutes for questions. So anyone who has any questions, I'd love to hear from you.
To me, the common thing today was, you don't know what you don't know. Whether it's the stats from the first panel on education to the amount of resources available, how do we as a group take that information back to our community? Or what's the best way to help share that information to child care or workforce solutions, or what the Urban League's doing?
Well, I know from our standpoint, that's the point of the foundation. I mean, just be blunt with it, is that we are a repository to give information, data points, and be a connector on these specific issues. Oftentimes when we talk about these things, I like the way Commissioner Demerson says, we'll just send people, we'll pawn them off. Be like, oh, okay, you talk to this person right here. No, you need to know who you actually need to talk to. Because the biggest part and the most frustration of government is all the red tape that comes with government. And it's unnecessary. And let's be honest, there are people who know how to get around that red tape. And there's no reason why each and every one of these persons in this room can't be along those lines to try to go ahead and get around those things. So I know from our standpoint, from the foundation, that's our role and our job. Quincy, you were about to jump in and say something.
I was going to say 90% of the information that you receive is going to come from a relationship-based source. So encourage your people to develop those relationships with the entities and the individuals in the entities, right? So I throw my title out. I hardly ever tell people I'm the CEO because I want to know how you're going to treat me, right? When we encounter each other, the way I'm going to feed you what you need to eat from me and vice versa, like to reciprocate, is I have to have an authentic engagement with you. I can't share something with you if you can't reach me. So I get these things on LinkedIn all the time, right? And there's people asking me, well, can you do business with us? Well, I know you're serious about business if you invest in the Urban League. If you're not willing to invest in the Urban League, why am I going to write you a check for business? Our business is a business of improving people's quality of life. If you're not invested in that, then we just dollar sign to you, right? So you're not interested in a non-transactional relationship. That's what it is. Non-transactional relationships help exchange that information and improve quality of life.
Speaking of investment, I see a young man just walked in here with a hat on who's invested in a lot of people's lives right here. So can't wait till y'all hear from him later on today.
Well, my question is in the child care space, because this is a big area for faith-based institutions as well, who would love to. Most of their Sunday school buildings and services are only used on the weekend. And there is a large capacity in church buildings to take up and be partners in this child care space. However, the issue becomes, if I receive government assistance or funding, does that mean that I have to restructure my moral stance in order to get the government funding and be able to take care of children?
So I think we were talking about innovation and unique approaches, things that this pandemic has proved out a lot. And so I've seen things that typically have not been done changed because of a conversation. And so if the faith-based organizations are interested in that kind of conversation, that's where I'd love to, let's sit down and let's ask the questions. Let's look at the obstacles that are there and see if there are opportunities for us to change it either at state level, federal level. Is it something that's a rule in-house by an agency, or is it something that takes legislative action? And then a group like the one that Rudy represents, our executive director for this foundation, you get legislative action change. And one thing that a lot of people agree in, I heard Roy Spence say this the other day, is that the success of a child, that's something that basically we can all get on board with that. We all want our kids to be successful and the children to be successful. And so that's a beginning part of a conversation. Does it make sense? Are rules and regulations antiquated from that standpoint? But beginning the dialogue and the conversation and getting the persons that can answer those questions directly is where we should begin. And so that's a relationship between you and I, a conversation, because I can convene the folks that have the purse strings that are running the programs from that standpoint, so that they can hear the questions and say, we've already heard that, this is why we can't do it, or this is how we can do it, or we've never thought of that before. Let's look at some innovative approaches. And then you take together industry, employers. If there's a benefit for a person receiving that's going to be better for their employee, that employer is interested in that conversation. So I look forward to kind of having that conversation with you.
Yeah, I can add to that because I've actually helped school districts navigate working with faith-based groups. And I can tell you there's a whole division at the White House that's all about trying to promote engagement and partnerships with faith-based organizations, and with not that much luck. But the fact is you can get any grant, any government grant, and the defining space is you can have any program with federal government dollars. It can be at your church or wherever in a school. And the key is usually they use the word proselytizing. So basically the breakdown of that is if you begin to now like teach your religion to a group of young people with this government funding, or at a school or whatever, that you should provide full disclosure and allow a parent to opt out if they want to opt out, because that may not be for them or whatever, conflict with their religious views, and then you would offer an alternative activity, you know, off to the side or somewhere that they could engage in that is not that. Now, if your whole program is just like, you know, general education and things like that, you know, it doesn't. But if you are to, and you probably will, right, you know, offer some things, you're going to talk about Jesus, you're going to, you know, want to, you know, spread that light. The key is you have to offer an opportunity to opt out, and that's that line that keeps it clear, and you have to have that documentation on file and make sure that people can see your protocols for that.
Great highlighting. Yes, ma'am.
Another problem that we have come across, you may have funds, but there's a waiting list. And a lot of parents, especially single mothers, is I want to go to work, but I don't have child care. And everywhere I turn, there's always a waiting list. So I can't wait 2 weeks. I can't wait 6 months out waiting for child care. My need is now. So you might want to look into how do I solve that problem? Because you have single mothers that have more than one child that I got to figure out, because I have a case right now, a mother of 5. 4 of them are in school since school started, but she has one that she can't find childcare for, and she has to go to work. She has a job waiting on her, but how long will that job last because I can't find childcare? You have the funds, but I can't find a childcare who has no openings. So what do I do?
In Texas, we have those 28 local workforce solution offices that I talked about, and so at the local level, there's child care at state level, but locally, that's where those impacts are. That waiting list is real, and I think before this pandemic, it was always called a waiting list, and it was looking at it as a waiting list. There's a lot of focus on that waiting list right now, a whole bunch of focus on why do we have a waiting list, and connecting so that in those kind of situations, the word is to find that parent, that quality child care. And so there's attention drawn to it. We'll continue to focus on that to make sure that we're making a difference. But throughout the state, the local workforce solution offices, like here in Austin, this capital area, are so. And if you're working with them, and then again, the relationships is like, Aaron, we couldn't get through, or this is not working for us, then we're in a position to make phone calls to at least allow the parent to know why, and then if the issue, whatever that issue is, that we continue to work towards solutions towards that. But that waiting list conversation, at one point when it was out there, it was just kind of one of the things, there's always going to be a waiting list. But right now, that's not an acceptable answer at all. We're working towards eliminating or reducing down that waiting list so that we don't have this impact of a person not being able to go to work because they can't find that quality child care.
I think it's a great way to close. Oftentimes, what I tell when I go visit first and second graders, I remind them that, I'm a council member, but government works for you. You don't work for government. And so you should rely on the folks who are in these positions to help solve these problems, because you do have people who are intelligent, hardworking, trying to go ahead and see, how nimble to go ahead and make discernible differences in each of your lives. Utilize those people, support those people, because oftentimes, let's be blunt, it's much easier to go ahead and complain about something than to actually go ahead and give praise and thanks to folks right there. So if they are doing something good, drop them a line. Just folks and give praise on that as well. If they're not doing something right, hold them accountable. But, this kind of discussion, these kind of issues, this is what needs to be done, not only here, but across the state for people to be cognizant about and work from there. So I want to thank our panel, for the wonderful answers and their, taking time today.
Rudy and I, we're mentoring or whatever. I think what Rudy should do is to give Quincy a 30-second opportunity to close out, Benny a 30-second opportunity to close out as well, and then we'll take our seats.
I think I'm going to take less than 30 seconds. If you're serious about the work, the Urban League is here to partner with you across the board. Plain and simple. Contact us. Come and see us. Let's partner, collaborate together. Period.
And I'm similar, all for collaboration. Don't do anything without people and process. That's really the magic sauce to everything we do at 212 Catalyst. And I would say that these types of things that, the questions that have come up are the things that I've worked through with systems, large as well as, the small nonprofits, large systems. If there's any way that, 212 Catalyst can help grease the wheels or get in there and unleash something, we develop contract language that's customized or whatever in order to facilitate a process sometimes for a partnership to even be able to happen, so there's just, we really will get into the weeds and get in the details and are happy to help wherever we can.
And then let's give our round of applause to Beanie, but a round of applause to our moderator today, Rudy Mateo. Thank you for an awesome job.
Great. As you guys head out, I'll remind you that lunch is on the 6th floor. We have our keynote speaker, David Emmerich, and we will start upstairs at 12:20. There are bathrooms on the 6th floor. Thank you. I'll see you guys at lunch.